You know, Yu-Gi-Oh has come a very long way in terms of mechanics over the years. We started with mechanics such as fusion summoning and ritual summoning, and now we're out here making extra link combos and hand whipping our opponents with their entire hand. But this video is not really about that. Today we're talking about Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest stinkers. We're talking about the worst of the worst mechanics that Yu-Gi-Oh has to offer. One of the first mechanics that come to mind is Spirit Monsters. Spirit Monsters are a really weird one. They're really underutilized in terms of the Yu-Gi-Oh card pool, but there is a few good cards among them. Like recently we've seen Aratama and Sakitama actually see competitive play and competitive success. For those uninitiated, Spirit Monsters are, for the most part, monsters that cannot be special summoned, which means they essentially just must be normal summoned or you can't play them at all. They usually have some sort of on-summon effect, but the worst part about Spirit Monsters is the fact that during the end phase, if they're normal summoned or flipped face up that turn, they must go back to the hand. What a weird mechanic. First, you can't special summon them, so you can't swarm your field with them to begin with, and then secondly, they don't even stick around that long. And unfortunately, there's no real, positive to this, at all. Outside of a handful of cards, the monsters going back to your hands is just a detriment, and the on-summon effects usually just aren't good enough to kind of justify bringing these monsters out there temporarily. This is a really weird mechanic, and hopefully they make more revamps of them soon. The second mechanic I'll be talking about today is link summoning. Now you're probably thinking, what are you talking about link summoning? Not specifically link summoning, but we're going to be talking about Master Rule 4. For those that don't know, before, the pandemic, the thing that happened, link monsters actually worked way differently than they do now. Initially, how link summoning worked was that, yes, link summoning now is the same. However, summoning XYZs or fusions, you also have to summon them to the zone link monsters pointed to, which was an awful decision made by Konami and deterred a lot of people from the game, mainly because you couldn't really play your old decks anymore. The kind of good part about Yu-Gi-Oh is that there was really no rotation. You could kind of always play your decks, but now with this rule change, it actually made a lot of decks not playable in the slightest, and they had to kind of band-aid this by giving these decks link monsters. And with hundreds of decks and themes in Yu-Gi-Oh, you can't really make a link monster for all of them. So eventually they had to rectify their mistake by making it so you could XYZ infusion in the main monster zone and extra monster zone, wherever you wanted to, even without a link arrow. With a few years with this master rule, it was pretty rough for anybody who wasn't playing a link deck. The next topic is zone blocking. This is just one of the worst mechanics they've ever done. The cards go from terribly, horrifically bad or bannable in some cases, which we have now. It's kind of weird that Cashier was this archetype that kind of just did it all, but then also just randomly made zone blocking a relevant thing again in the year of our Lord 2023. With some of the oldest zone blocking cards being cards like Ground Collapse, and a bit less so with Ojama Trio, and only really became a problem with Kashtira and Diablosis' interaction with Kashtira Shangri-La, being able to essentially lock out all of your opponent's zones. This mechanic just isn't interesting in the slightest, and the cards for it are also just horrendously bad unless they're an extra deck one. Who would have thought that an extra deck monster would cause a problem, huh? And it wouldn't be a worst mechanics list without Gemini. Yes, look, I know, really obvious one. This is just the worst mechanic in Yu-Gi-Oh ever. I can't even think of, why they came up with this, and, it just pains me to just think about how bad Geminis are, and there's just really no way of salvaging Geminis in the slightest. Shout out to all the Edison players who can actually make, Geminis somewhat of a viable strategy, but in current Yu-Gi-Oh, there ain't no way in hell they're making Geminis ever playable. Without just completely just removing the text on those cards, it's rough out here. Gemini monsters are monsters that are essentially, when you summon them, they're just normal monsters. But if you normal summon them, again, okay, look, bear with me. Normal summoning the monster while it's already on the field, really weird, okay? I don't know who came up with that. But if you do so, the monsters will gain an additional effect. Usually terrible, because Gemini monsters are horrendously bad. Outside of Gigaplant and what's the other good one? Ill Blood? Ill Blood? Okay, look, Gemini's just the worst. I don't even want to begin to explain why this is bad. You can't even, unexpected die for a Gemini monster because they're only normal monsters while they're on the field or in the graveyard. Are they in the normal summon in the graveyard? Who cares? Okay, but basically, this is just the worst mechanic they've ever made in Yu-Gi-Oh! Okay, it's not even It's not even close. Okay, Spirits, pretty up there, right? But horrendous, awful, awful. And my number one worst mechanic in Yu-Gi-Oh's history is Burning Abyss. Fuck you, Nadir.